Okay, so this is just a little bit of an introduction to the course Beating Anxiety. And it's about getting to know your anxiety and learning how to manage this troublesome feeling. So first I wanted to just cover why we would even want to address anxiety. Well, anxiety is very prevalent globally. So the proportion of the global population with anxiety disorders in 2015, which is a few years ago now, was estimated to be 3.6%. Which makes the estimated number of people living with anxiety disorders to be estimated to be 264 million. Now, these are looking at people who actually have been diagnosed with anxiety disorders. A lot of people live with high levels of anxiety, but are not suffering from what we would define as an actual disorder. So if you have a disorder, I will go through this in a bit more detail in the course, but you need to meet a certain criteria and it needs to be impacting your functioning quite significantly to be counted as a disorder. So even looking at the clinical levels, it's a lot of people. And I think it's interesting to note as well that the total for 2015 reflects a 14.9%, so nearly a 15% increase since 2005. And that's mainly as a result of population growth and aging, but it is very common and it is growing. It's a growing concern. It's more common among females than males, so generally it's around 2 to 1, so 2 females to 1 male. If we think about it in percentages, it would be 4.6% compared to 2.6%, and that's at a global level, and that's in 2015. Interestingly, in the Americas, it's been noted to be about 7.7% for the female population and males about 3.6%. So it can vary from country to country. Anxiety affects all age groups. So the prevalence rates do not vary substantially between the different age groups, although there is an observable trend towards lower prevalence among older age groups. And finally, it's important to note that people who experience anxiety can also experience other difficulties. So anxiety is often comorbid with other disorders, and it's very common for people to experience, for example, both anxiety and depression. And what about worry? So we talk about anxiety. We also need to think about worry, which is similar. Only about 5% of people say they don't worry. So everyone worries a little bit. Most healthy people tend to worry about 5 to 10% of the time. So a certain level of worry is very, very normal. Unfortunately, excessive worry can lead to high anxiety and sometimes can even lead to panic. So why am I covering off these areas of anxiety and worry? Well, I think it's important to note that it's very, very common. So if you're suffering from anxiety, don't think that you're the only one. There are lots and lots of other people that are dealing with the same issues, the same concerns. It's very common. And even healthy people worry a little bit of the time. It becomes unhelpful when it is excessive. So we have a tendency to worry more these days because often we're not worrying about things perhaps that we used to when we were in the caveman years, for example. So we're not having to really worry about where we get our next meal from, or what clothes we're going to wear, or where we're going to live. All those kind of things are a little bit more manageable these days than in olden times. So these days a lot of worry is often interpersonal things which don't really go away, and so we can think about those ongoing and worry and worry and worry. But again, I'll talk about this a bit more in the course. So what are we going to cover? The course covers what is anxiety and worry in a little bit more detail. I talk about why anxiety gets worse so quickly. So I'm sure you've noticed that sometimes you feel anxious and then the next minute you're feeling a bit panicky, perhaps a bit claustrophobic. It can get to be quite a strong feeling quite quickly. And I'll talk about why that happens and what you can do to address it. We'll talk about early intervention and prevention. So again, it's helpful to intervene as early as possible, if not even try to prevent anxiety from developing. So in this section, I'll be teaching you some strategies. Then we're going to cover accepting anxiety versus pushing it away. You may have heard that sometimes accepting things can be more helpful than pushing them away. So this is what this is covering. Often with things we don't like anxiety and the feelings we get with anxiety, rather than deal with them, we would prefer to push them away or avoid them. And as much as that might feel good in the short term, in the long term, it's not very helpful. And finally, we're going to look at working on your thoughts. So I'm sure you've all heard of cognitive behavior therapy. This is an area where we're looking at your cognitions or your thoughts. And so that's an overview of what's going to be covered in the course. As always, as we go through, if you've got any questions, any concerns, please do contact me. And I hope you enjoy the next few lectures.